This episode of CelloChat is brought to you by Carriage House Violins of Johnson String Instrument. Please visit us at www.carriagehouseviolins.com.
And we're now live.
Good afternoon. My name is Tyler James, and I'm Dr. Terry King's teaching assistant. And it's my distinct pleasure to be introducing him today. We want to give a special thanks to Cello Bello and also to Monday Music for helping make all of this totally possible for us. And I'm very happy to say that Dr. King was a protégé of Mr. Piatigorsky and was part of the Grammy-nominated Mirror Trio for over 30 years, and has currently just retired from his teaching jobs at the Longy School of Music and the Hart School. And today he will be discussing Piatigorsky, What Remains.
Yes, what remains from my experience being his student. So welcome everyone. The subject today is a huge one, and I can only scratch the surface. But you'll get an idea of Piatigorsky's teaching, his attitude and philosophy. Yes, he was the master, but his genuine generosity made him very effective. This is a basic trait of being a teacher. He referred to himself as our friend, an older colleague. That's generosity. We always wore coats and ties and stood when he entered the room. It was a sign of respect, of course, but it also made formal attire, concert clothes, of little consequence. You'll see we were taught from the old school, that is, in a class situation. We met twice a week for most of the day and brought our lunch along. All of us benefited from each other's strengths and weaknesses, and we got to cover a lot of repertoire, etudes, and spontaneous exercises. We had private lessons at his home as needed, and assistants to help as well. There was goodwill for each other. If there was any jealousy, it was in the form of inspiration to urge us to reach ever higher. It's amazing to think that Piatigorsky was a 19th as well as a 20th century performer. All his teachers were born in the 1850s. They performed with Brahms, Tchaikovsky, Grieg, etc. And Piatigorsky made music with composers like Richard Strauss, Rachmaninoff, Stravinsky, Prokofiev, and Hindemith. Conductors like Toscanini, Mengelberg, Kuzovitsky, and Weingartner. These names might not ring too many bells, but this was the golden era of the mid and early 20th century. His performers, his colleagues, were Horowitz, Rubinstein, of course, many others, but Mr. Heifetz in particular, who had his master classes at the same time in the same building, the Clark House. And unfortunately, that building is no longer in existence. It was a very warm and welcoming place. We had very much affection for that. So Mr. Piatigorsky reflected his lineage as well as his own time. Some of the characteristics of the past gets lost, and this is an eternal observation of each era. But again, there are gains as well. Consistency and accuracy especially come to mind. So let's watch a few minutes of a typical class, and we'll make comments afterward.
Okay, so we're going to share a clip now. All right, and
Speak up.
You will notice that the clip starts quietly, so no need to panic. If you wait just 30 seconds, you'll find the audio to be more normalized.
noise
then it is really difficult. Rampa, 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 rampa. That note will be good. Then the rest will follow automatically. But if the long note is bad, then the short, which follows it, will be also not satisfactory. Now try to play the long note well. Now that was good. That's right. But you see, when we have all black note disease. One sees black note, and then one is there. And so one always misses the easy note. Anybody would play beautiful, ram-pam, if only two notes. It would be beautiful. But that's what follows. Spoils everything. No, but very good, Terry. I still would like to one day, I hope pretty soon, to hear that Rega. Well, I don't know, maybe Thursday, Sunday.
Okay.
We seem to be here forever.
Pertaining to Terry getting nervous and whatever.
Yeah.
That always happened to me when I was playing. I always felt so nervous that I wasn't.
But look, you.
But like I thought that.
Yes.
I was always afraid to fail. I was always afraid that I would do bad. But as soon as I could admit to myself that I wasn't afraid to fail or fall all over myself, then I felt more confident.
Well, you see, none of you, anybody has monopoly on stage fright and things like that. You only think that you're specially chosen to be terribly nervous, you see. Everybody, I've never met yet a hero before the concert. Never. And there's some great artists, you see, like for instance Shalapin, you see, used to throw up before the concert and said that he lost his voice. And the other people, there's many things happen, you see. And everyone is different. That stage fright, it is something that you must know. You have to live with it. So therefore, your obligation is to master it. Generally, one does not learn that in the school. In the school, mostly one learns about the style, method, and a particular manner of holding the bow, and all those things that you will find on the long end not very useful. Here I try to be, we here are very unorthodox people, and I want you to succeed, to be a real, true, good servant of art. And I have always tremendous faith, because my students generally are well-balanced, happy people and who contribute. And so, then another thing, one must also, in our profession, there's a lot of psychology, you see, involved. It also depends, everyone is a totally different person. Some people are, before the performance, they would say, well, it will be terrible. And then I may have memory slip. And there's one passage, I will not hit that note, And there are many other almost masochistic pleasures, you see, you can derive out of performance, you see. So therefore, is a very good advice would be, you have to try to think positively, and you must try to like yourself. Okay, what's now?
Okay, we're back. So the first point that he makes is the importance of singing. We tend to do what I call drive-bys, The easier things are ignored in favor of passage work and other challenges. We always hear about singing. You must sing, but how little we really do it. Why is it important? Singing is common to civilization and music making of all kinds. When we are born, the doctor gives a little pat and we cry. The voice is the one thing in our intuitive self that really never leaves. Oh, it gets knocked around, gets knocked out of us very early on. Be quiet, shut up, and other things that disrupt our experience and becomes a form of shaming. But it's still in there. We have to bring it out. That means singing out loud, horribly and out of tune sometimes, but fearlessly out loud, like you might do in the car or the shower. It's not going to happen just by singing in your head, especially to begin this kind of introspection. Now, imitate with bow and fingers. Music is infinitely variable, and so are our choices. Isn't that wonderful? If we substitute imitating someone else's playing, as if we were inadequate, the best we can ever hope to be is an imitation. We may start that way by imitating, as we do from most of our early activity, like walking, talking, and even handwriting. But there is a point that it becomes destructive when we don't leave the nest in time, as it were. And we cellists are really singing, when we're really singing slow stuff, forget positions. There's no reason to finish a brilliant note on 3 all the time. The next scene was the question that the wonderful cellist Dennis Karmazin asked about nerves. I had a shaky bow at times. You can imagine being in a class situation like this. Lessons were performances. And so over time, nerves could be minimized, but still it can haunt us. It was a stubborn thing for me until one day, while playing a recital, I started to shake. I got so angry, I said to myself, all right, Terry, go ahead, shake. Shake all you want. I was looking at my arm. All of a sudden, I was able to control it. I could talk to it. It was a form of distraction that worked for me. Distraction can be anything. Looking around, curling your toes, smiling, sticking out your tongue. It's a form of control that can get you through stubborn impediments in your practice. But I don't recommend any of this publicly like I did. He spoke about liking yourself. He used to say to me, throw out the window anything you don't like about yourself. Good advice, of course, but it's not easy to do. As far as cello playing, it came in the form of pleasing myself. Why shouldn't we love our playing? I have been asked, as I'm sure many of you have, who's your favorite cellist? I always change the subject because the answer was arrogant as a professional. Me. Oh, sure, I admire all famous cellists and enjoyed and loved them wholeheartedly, and I admit to stealing better ideas from them, like fingerings and bowings and the like. By the way, there is a skill to develop this friendly thievery, as I call it, and I recommend it. Before YouTube, you had only one choice to steal, and that was at a concert. To take liking yourself to the next level musically, that is, loving yourself, loving your playing, I found that exploring and satisfying every level of perception you have in your practice leads to confidence. Perception includes everything. Tone first. Everything exists in sound. Then all the components you care about, from vibrato, intonation, color, shapes, dynamics, gestures, rhythm, even your attitude. So, what is a concert? A concert is an opportunity to share. It's the culmination of your devotion, integrity, self-respect. And if we really satisfy our perception, memory is no particular chore unless we are in a hurry. Sometimes this is reality. Ideally, Stravinsky and Mark Twain said it best, I have no time to be in a hurry. Or, sorry, this is a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one. We tend to think of practice time unrealistically. We work on a passage and think, I'll never have enough time. But if you practice smart, we are talking seconds, not hours. There should be a little time between repetition for you to think and to experiment. My mantra is, how many problems do you have? The answer is often devastating. Hundreds. Not true. You only have one at a time. How do you choose? I choose the one I'm most afraid of or worried about. How long should you practice? Long enough that you can honestly say, it's better today, or at least I understand it better today. It may only be a measure or a line, but your self-respect and belief that it will come will win out. How often did you think, yep, I'm getting it, only to find tomorrow it's not where you left off? This is the normal sequence of success. Back up, go slower. Don't get greedy expecting a miracle in a day. We need to prove it to ourselves over time to actually believe it. It is a profound honesty. No thinking, it's okay now. No. It takes whatever time it takes. Sometimes maintaining a certain level or speed is progress. Mr. Piatigorsky always said, get it into your blood. Eventually the sensation is, how does it feel to play it the way you want? And ideally, we aren't playing the cello, we're only making music. That's the end goal. I assume most of you are in school. It's challenging to master everything we are asked to do on an academic schedule. Time management is a constant worry. You may have a dozen demands, so efficient management is so important. You can't devote all the time you'd like daily, so cycle in all the demands you have over a couple of days, giving a specific time limit to each situation, being realistic. Meaning, progress is more important than quantity. Make the goals attainable. Actually be able to say, yes, I can do that, before you begin. If you do this, you'll have more time to breathe and maybe take on a bit more. The thing is to be realistic. I've oversimplified, but the message is useful overall.
I know one thing
Yeah.
you and I talked about, that you would say, Piatigorsky would say, would be something like knowing your strengths, and knowing what you do well.
Yeah, right. Knowing your strengths is the beginning point of Piatigorsky's teaching. Each of us had our own beginnings. It never was a programmed sequence of events. He began where you were, and where you were, he capitalized on your strengths first. Develop those strengths, and through those strengths, other things would emerge. You can't run away from the things that aren't working. They're going to show up eventually. They're going to show up, all your shortcomings. But your strengths are the things that can develop us through the whole journey of your growth. It was a beautiful thing. Also, it developed your rapport with your teacher. So, making a list and their deadlines was important for my students to have. Without your daily schedule, meaning when you wake up, start the day, practice times, class times, study times, meals, sleep, and yes, fun too. Each day is probably different, that's fine. Try and get the bulk of your practice done early in the day. I found it was a good day when I got good cello work done first. After all, what's more important? Make clocks or timesheets, much like a professional office of some kind. Concentric circles of clocks are good visuals, giving specific times to each thing. Always figure in relaxation and social activity, though sometimes social activity is only a rehearsal. And always get enough sleep. If you don't get enough sleep, you'll get sick. Then where are you? So now, what were some of Piatigorsky's big points? This is quite a challenge because I studied with him for years, and I wrote a book. about him and lots of his ideas. So, when it concerns me, I'll share my journey a bit. I used to get very fatigued playing a Bach prelude with its constant motion, lifting the fingers after a note and then the release. I kept the tension, so I never got to relax the hand. I never recovered. So he said everything we do with the hands stems from the fist, left and right hands. So a good example is you can do this with or without a cello. Make a strong fist. Bring it to first position and just set it down. All right, now let's make a wide hand. Lots of opening your hand. Now come to first position again and set it down. There are two senses of balance there, right? One is a little more tense than the other.
Yeah,
So
I feel a lot of tension between the fingers, especially. You know?
yeah. And he used to say, if you interlock your fingers, you'll find your intonation inside of it somewhere in there. And this is what I call anatomical intonation. That's another subject. There's just not enough time today to do it. Maybe we'll do some more of these sort of things on my website.
You often talk to me a lot about fourth position. And
Yes.
how that, because it's more like the fist. It's actually in a sense more
Right.
natural.
Yes. Yeah, when you go to fourth position, doesn't it feel like you're gloved? It feels right, you know? And guess what? Your thumb and your first finger are pals. They're together. It's not second finger, which is the old German school, you know, which would inhibit vibrato, or can inhibit vibrato a little bit.
Of course, there's behind the first finger.
So anyhow, fourth position feels right.
Yeah.
So take fourth position down to first position, and you have what I think is an anatomically correct hand. So,
You've often told me a lot about how playing the cello is a lot like boxing, okay? And that you're trying to connect the fist to the arms too, right?
right.
Okay.
Right. Well, there's finger knowledge, and then there's arm knowledge, and arm knowledge is something we tend to ignore in favor of busyness with your fingers. For instance, twinkle twinkle little star with your arm. Your arm knows those intervals, and it goes up with the cello. You know, it's something you can count on. You know, I had to write all these notes because the subject is so big. I have to keep to my notes, or else we won't get through it.
I understand. And there's a lot of effect on chromaticism too, right?
Yes.
All these ideas, they all connect to.
When we talk about the fist, you know, the hand is chromatic, and basically, and the whole cello is chromatic, basically. But the trouble is, we're taught in positional thinking. The old German tradition is method, and the method was position is everything. Position is first. And you can listen to some of the old recordings, like Klengel. He would play, what was it, Kosman? I forgot the mazurka or something. Anyhow, it has a dotted rhythm, dum da dum dum, and he would go dum da dum da dum, because he had to finish a position before he shifted.
Yeah, you and I have talked a lot about this in pauper etudes, okay? Because you know, as a good student, I'm trying to learn all the fingerings that he wrote, but after I learned them, you made me change them, which was okay. That's a lot more. It was a little more work, but I mean, there was a logic to it.
Yes. There's every reason to play Mr. Popper's fingerings, absolutely. But there's also every reason to jump into the 20th century and revise those fingerings as well. Play it both ways. If I had the same passage, let's say a Popper passage and another piece of music, a new piece of music, likely wouldn't use Mr. Popper's fingering. I would use something a little more modern. I mean, something as simple as the beginning of the C major cello sonata. you know?
Yeah.
4, 3.
Yeah, if you play 4.
And then 4,
I'm exaggerating, but
and then 4, 3, 2, 1. I mean, this is a very simple
you'll see
example.
4/4 too, right?
And 4/4 is also.
But this is a little more.
Yeah. So that's more modern. You could be totally successful not doing it, but I think it's useful to explore and to find other ways of doing things. If you could find 2 or 3 ways of doing something, how many times have you had this experience where you think, okay, I got the fingering. Well, how do you test that fingering? How do you know it's better than another fingering? You give it the speed test too, you know.
Yeah.
Play it faster than you need to, or slower than you need to, and then you'll find the tendency for the best one.
That's right.
Yeah. So, all right. First position.
And then that can have an effect on the actual phrasing, okay? Because otherwise you have to do shifts that you don't want to do sometimes if you're not thinking chromatically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my saying is, how small does it work? How small? In other words, we don't need to do unnecessary stretches, but also the hand can remain chromatic throughout the whole cello. I mean, we can play thumb position and half position.
Yeah.
Don't do that nearly enough. I mean, there are many passages that's a better solution. While we're at it, I mean, try the A major example. Here, this is a typical way of playing it. Go ahead. Now you see that last note? I really don't like to shift the last note of a phrase like that.
You maybe play it in position.
And now we're ready for your thumb.
Yeah.
Isn't that nice? Anyhow, that's what I call more modern.
Now, Mr. Piatigorsky had a reasonable bow arm too. Okay.
That's putting it.
Yeah. He seemed to know how the bow worked.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, he was pretty masterful with his bow.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask in the spur of the moment. Okay. The down bow spiccato. Okay.
Staccato.
Sorry, excuse me, staccato. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it was the envy of everybody. I mean, including violinists. There's 2 schools of thought, basically. There's the arm kind, or I call it machine gun style.
You mean kind of more of a...
that kind of thing. And then there was his style, which was more of a spoken singing style. If instead of putting dots over it, put a little dash over it, and so it had a very elegant way of doing it.
So talk me through that. Okay. A little bit.
All right. So for a down bow, he talked more about doing right hand vibrato, which was a little like this, rather than the arm doing it.
I've heard some people say you kind of squeeze the arm basically and go this way, but you're saying it's more of a release.
Right. It's a skill that you can get by without knowing it, but when you have it, it's pretty nice to have visually. It's pretty magical. He used to say that down bow was easier than up bow because it followed your arc. Up bow is a little bit against, but he did up bows just as beautifully. There's the little film, early television film from 1949 or so, and he's playing a bunch of short pieces, and several of them he shows the beautiful staccatos, up bow and down bow. It's really a beautiful thing to see. And guess who taught him? It was Mr. Heifetz, way back in the 1920s. Piatigorsky and Heifetz were good friends from way back that time. And he said to Heifetz, my staccato is no good. He says, really? Oh, well, let's go in the bedroom and we'll work it out. This is at his apartment. And in 20 minutes, he came out and he said to his accompanist, Karolchik, I got it. And he always gave Heifetz the credit for his staccatos, but just between us, I think his better. This was better. So, yeah, there was a lot to... In the classes, I would often just stand behind him and watch his bow work or watch his left hand. He let us do, everything that you could see in that. The classroom was very free. We had formality, but we had freedom at the same time, and all of us learned from each other. In fact, we would play for each other. It was not unusual at all. In fact, he encouraged that. So, all right, I'll get back to my...
Sure.
Okay, I was talking about practice sheets. And where are you? Big points. So how small does it work? Keeping the hand in a chromatic shape is what I call the default position. And if you always go back to that, your hand will stay more relaxed, and it's healthier in general. So as we ascend, there are two kinds of spacings that we should be cognizant of. And there's intervallic space and there's physical space. So play B flat in first position, first finger B flat and fourth finger D. So that's normal. Okay. Now take D and go to G. Basically, that's the same physical space. Yeah. But how often have we heard... I'm a little allergic to that one. So anyhow, that illustrates intervallic space versus physical space. And as you go up the cello, exponentially, that becomes more and more true. And if you really have that in your mind, the cello becomes less a problem geographically. In fact, if you take an octave and you slide up an octave, at some point it becomes a tenth.
That's right.
Without any trouble at all.
Not doing any work at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So we tend to think of tenths as monster intervals, but they really aren't such a big deal. Yeah. Oh, I could go on. Alrighty. So how small does it work?
We could also take a moment to take some questions, if there are any.
Oh, any questions up there yet?
And then we can come back to
Are we into a half an hour already?
We are, actually.
Wow.
But if there are any questions, we'd be happy to answer them now, and then we can come back and we'll go back and forth maybe.
Okay.
Okay, so there's something in the chat here. How do you deal with hyperextension in the fingers?
Okay.
Also, the little finger collapsing and locking.
All right. Those are two big questions. And I had the fourth finger lock. Okay.
You want a cello?
Well, I'll get this.
We got cellos everywhere.
Yeah. You realize, of course, friends, I can't play, but I can maybe, can you see this? I can't see the screen.
They can if you move your stand.
Okay.
And I'll move the microphone.
All right.
You can see that.
So as far as like extensions are concerned, put your forearm next to your ribs. I'm exaggerating, and go 1 3 1 2 on the C string is the best. 1 3 1 2. The 2 is really hard to do without some mobility in the upper arm. And how much is it? Find the sweet spot. Where does that feel best? Look around for that. And it's a little bit up and a little bit back. See what I mean?
Absolutely. And also looking at how the hand opens.
Yes.
Because you obviously don't want to be this.
No.
But if you hyper do just this interval, okay, it's going to be really tight. So you have to kind of look at how your hand opens and move with the arm, right?
Yeah.
That helped me a lot when we did that.
Sure. Again, it illustrates how small does it work, you see. This is really hard to do, but this is easy to do. The other one was the fourth finger. Well, I used to have this collapse right on this joint here, and I can't do it anymore. I was double jointed there.
Oh, it would come down here.
It would flatten out here, right on the second joint.
I see.
I used to have that. How'd you get over that, Terry? Well, there is a point at which, if you think about the fourth finger particularly as an arch, as a bridge, if you want, there is one point where it's working just fine, and where that might be a little higher than you want it to be, more perpendicular than you want it to be, and then I would do isometrics. Isometric just means holding it down, not straining, just holding it down. Use the third finger for a little help, and just feel that. And do this with the cello, back and forth. That's another way to test if your fingers are doing the right thing. And pretty soon, this arch will take over. That was how it worked for me. And I was double jointed. And I'm okay.
I used to have that problem too, and I took that idea. And for me, it's easy to think of your hands as just left, right, but they have to go fingers have to go a little in front of each other too, because we're three-dimensional, right?
Yeah.
So if I think of the pinky just a little more in front of the third finger, that that helped me stop from totally collapsing. I don't know if that tracks with you.
Yeah, sure it does. And notice I've been doing it in fourth position because the hand is smaller there. First position, it's bigger, and so it's a little harder to understand this arch that I'm talking about. But here, everything is friendlier in fourth position. So you find the arch, and isometric. Don't press too hard. Hold it for a few seconds at a time. Shake your cello.
Okay, good. Oh, we had a lot of questions here.
Uh-oh.
Okay, let's see here. What was the first thing you did on the cello every day?
The first thing?
Yes.
Well, I don't know if I had time to mention it, but the first thing I do is find my sound. Everything is in sound. So the first thing I do is get in touch with it, happy with the sound that I'm making. And I try and play not in the same place all the time. The practice room, it's too comfortable. I want to play in different rooms. Or if you don't have any choices of rooms, play in the corner, play in the middle of the room, play in different places so that you're not caught unguarded, any other at the time. What was it? Is that the question? Did I answer
absolutely.
it? Okay.
And why don't you continue on for a bit, and then we'll go back and do a couple more questions.
All righty. So we're talking about extensions. Okay. So, when learning repertoire, use the music as a reference as soon as you can, rather than stare at something you already know. How often do you see a recital with the player staring at the music before they even begin? I mean, that's like someone giving a lecture and not looking at the audience and looking down like this. This is kind of the same thing. You want to be open, and what is a concert? Sharing. So you're going to share. This is hiding. This is a crutch. Looking at the music that you already know. The other thing is put your music stand up at eye level. That forces you to sit up, and it forces you to use the music as a reference. As you get to know the music and you're happy with yourself, you can lower the stand as low as you want. Lots of string quartets have their stands as low as the stand will go. That's fine, but they're not staring at the notes because they don't know those notes. They stare at the music because it's just a reference. And often there are quartets now that play from memory. So, as we do with the solo repertoire.
Yeah, you've often told me that performing is, I think about this a lot, it's a visceral experience. Okay, and to kind of own the space around you.
Yes.
And for me, I think of it as, not that I'm not a surfer, but all those humans in a room, can you feel their presence?
Yes.
Okay, you can either kind of ride that wave or succumb to it, okay, or distract yourself from it. What you kind of taught me, which I think Piatigorsky taught you, was kind of ride that wave a little bit. Is that fair to say?
Oh, sure, it's fair to say. He was the point of today's lecture is as what he taught and how did it end up in my life as something authentic to myself. And though he never talked exactly like that, my takeaway was, we're all on this earth, and we're occupying some space, and we own that space. And that space, you can, like Tyler was saying, if you make a circle around yourself, you own this territory, and don't let anybody in. Nobody's allowed in. It's your space. And if you really practice that way, you can take that space with you. You can take that sense of owning this space. And that's another building block of confidence. Yeah.
Excellent.
Another question, or should we go?
Dealer's choice.
Dealer's choice. Okay. I don't mean to speak pejoratively, and here's the sad truth. No one cares how many hours it took for you to play on stage, what the struggles are. Nobody cares. They're all there to enjoy the music. So we have to make peace with everything that we do with music, that it has to be authentic to ourselves. That we own the cello, we own the sound that we make, we own the music that we play. So maybe I should before we take any more questions, I want to pass out some more advice for beyond this class. I recommend you watch and study the videos of Shafran to see the marvelous use of the thumb, Feuermann, Casals, and Piatigorsky for the sleek economy of motion and naturalness, Perigny for economy of bow and thoughtful original fingerings. Every great player has something to offer. We live in an era of such easy access. You can claim the world as your teacher in ways unimaginable not too long ago. So you live in a wonderful era, and you get to record yourself, video. You can be very critical and realistic about yourself and your progress. Use these tools in a positive way. It's very, very, very easy to criticize. It doesn't take much at all to say what's wrong. But if you, in your practice, can get to the point where you say, I like it. I like what I'm doing. In fact, I love what I'm doing. That's the road that you should be headed on. So.
I think that one of the things I took away from the video we watched was how he was saying his students they're happy and they're productive and they're contributing and they're servants of art, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
Absolutely.
The goal, one could easily spend their life feeling like they were inadequate because the problems are so extensive, and but I think what you taught me, at least, was to find a beauty in what you're doing yourself, and to be confident about it.
Yes. Please yourself. And pleasing yourself is on every level of perception. And that means everything. And if you really please yourself on all those levels, you can own your music in every way possible,
We got another question here.
Okay.
How do you approach learning vibrato?
Okay, learning vibrato. I'll tell you this. If you already have vibrato and you don't like it, it's a very difficult thing to change.
Let me tell you.
Yeah. So, we can talk about exercises for your vibrato, but I can tell you, caution you against what I call a turnkey. This thing, in, out, and out, playing flat, sharp, flat, sharp. I really don't think that's a great idea. vibrato is basically, I mean, if you play up high, you can't help but do it with, it's your arm that does the vibrato. Now you can do a little bit of hand, you can do, but basically vibrato is arm. And so why not practice arm? Now, so many ways to do it. If you're just a beginner starting, you can take a piece of paper, see? Take a piece of paper, put it on a surface, put your finger down on it, and start polishing it. And then add some weight to it, and then pretty soon you get a note, and then you see how your arm can do the motion for you. But I don't do this sort of thing to do it. So with your arm, do it. It doesn't sound great doing it this way, but up and down this way. So I don't know if you can see, but this is a way to start your vibrato exercises. It's less to do with the finger, more to do with your arm. So I hope that's helpful in 10 seconds.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Next question. Can you speak about creating flexibility in the bow hand?
Yes. Well, let's see.
You want a bow?
Yeah.
You got a bow?
I have no arm left, folks. So you're just gonna have to.
That's the wrong hand. Would you like the other hand? Sorry.
Oh, right. There's the frog. Oh, God. So with the bow, the flexibility. If you can do finger motion parallel to the floor, ups and downs, circles, without moving your wrist, I think your fingers are going to be okay. It's when we don't have this flexibility that we get into all kinds of trouble. So parallel, circles, ups and downs, and then if you take this thing here, let's take it into another era or another example. If you go parallel to the floor, for string crossings, it's the same motion. You wouldn't think it would work that way, but isn't that amazing? That's the same thing as this. Here, you can do it better than I.
I don't know, you're doing pretty well over there, but something like that.
Yeah. So the old way.
So I'm hitting the mic here.
Yeah. The old way is.
Would we use
Lots of.
getting around
Now
that way?
use your fingers. That's right.
Much more efficient.
Yeah, so the flexibility is in the hand, not so much in the wrist. We use the wrist. There's flexibility everywhere, but the thing that I think your question was in the fingers, right?
Yeah,
Question.
flexibility in the fingers.
That's the big message. Circles, parallels, ups and downs. Without the wrist, you're going to be okay.
One thing that you taught me that really changed my perception, was that everything is connected to the arm. I mean, everything is, the idea that your fingers are totally isolated from everything else. Okay, that's just not true.
Yeah.
Everything is connected.
Yes.
Okay, so.
Yeah. It's like a mobile, something hanging from a string, design or something like that. You touch one thing, and the other things react to it. So we're like that. We have our skeleton and muscles, and it's all a bunch of levers, and our job is to use those levers in a healthy way. And lots of times we get into trouble when we don't do that. So that's another class.
No, of course, I understand. Okay, let's do another question here. What are the best ways to prevent injury?
First of all, don't over practice. Use a clock, or what do you call it? A wind-up clock, for cooking or whatever.
I think they got phones now.
Oh, damn! You see, that's me. Old school.
Okay, we don't need the egg timer anymore.
Don't need the egg timer.
I mean, maybe you need the egg timer. I don't know.
You see, folks. Anyhow, use your iPhone, whatever, and put a time limit on it, and make yourself get up from the chair, walk around. Do something different. And what I was saying about schoolwork too, it's good to contrast your schoolwork with, suppose you have some theory, that's one activity. Yeah, that's solitary. I mean, that's sedentary. I would walk around and now do something different. Cello. And then do something different. So to always come back feeling fresh, and the best thing is to be inspired to start again. And if you're anxious to start again, let me put it this way. If you're a good teacher, you're like this with a student. You're trying to help. You're always trying to help. And if you're helping, you're looking out for the best interest in the student. So if you treat yourself as your favorite student, you're going to be doing a lot of good for yourself. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out this. It's abusive to sit there for hours or to go over and over and over. Repetition is good when you understand something. The rest of the practice is 90% of it is experimenting and finding. Then once you find it, then the repetition matters. But never just pound it out over and over and over again. So that creates injuries here and here and here. So just be reasonable about how you spend your time and your drills. If you over drill the same activity over and over again, you don't need to do that. Always contrast it.
Excellent. How did your practicing evolve over the years?
It became better. I can only talk to you about my experience because I evolved, and my practice was just as bad as any of you, and I got better at it. I learned the hard way. For instance, the shaky bow stuff. It wasn't hold my bow slightly different or there wasn't. It was just talk to your supraspinatus muscle. You know, it wasn't that obscure or that unusual. It was more like doing motions that we would do without a cello here. Yeah, I just take this. What I mean by that is global motions that you do. We try and incorporate that into your cello, so that it's not unusual. For instance, your arm gets tired or something like that because you're locking your shoulder or something like that. Here's a little trick you can do. I call it tapping. You take the tip of the bow and the frog, you just tap away, but you go fast, and then you'll see the arcs that you need. So tap, 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 tap. And even with my shoulder injury, I can do this. It doesn't hurt anything because my arm is more like a pendulum rather than something lifted and stressed. So just tapping like this can give you a good idea of not doing that. Or, you know, the other way. Gosh, there's so much to share. Anyhow.
No, that all makes sense.
Okay.
You spent a long time thinking about your bow arm.
Yeah.
Let's see. We've got another question. How do you deal with a weak fourth finger in the bow hand? The pinky becomes straight when playing. So kind of this sort of locking here on this side. Okay.
So what does the fourth finger do? Here we go. I need the bow.
Okay.
If you think about what the fingers do on the bow, you can be kinder to your fourth finger. You can play pretty successfully without a fourth finger on most of the stuff we play. If you're not lifting any bow, if you're just playing legatos, I could play all day without a fourth finger. What do you need the fourth finger for? I need it for power, for chords, to have the whole hand involved, and I need it for lifts. What do I mean by lift? This is what I mean by lift. Now, what is the fourth finger is just an opposite force. The thumb goes up, first finger goes down, fourth finger goes down. So up with your one, pulling up, thumb goes up, fourth finger goes down, you have a little teeter-totter going, if you know what I mean. So it never becomes especially tense because if you think about the weight of the bow, how many grams is it? It's just a few grams. But we tend to overdo. I would suggest if this is really stubborn for you, hold the bow up high so you can really
at the balance
feel,
point, right?
Yeah, at the point of balance so that you can make friends with the fourth finger and see that it's a helping finger. It's not a stressed finger. My fourth finger never got in trouble like my left hand did.
I had some problems with that. I think for me, I used to lock this wrist right here. Okay, and so what happened is the pinky would get tight, and then you gave me this exercise where I would grab the bow like this. Okay, you find my pinky's quite happy.
Yeah.
Okay, and so learning to develop that feeling. Okay, without, because right on that side where the bridge is, you want to kind of, you're learning to, without, that helped me a lot.
Good. I hope that scratched the surface at least.
Absolutely. And I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Okay.
And then maybe some final thoughts. Okay. Let's see here. What was the first thing you did on the cello every day?
The first thing, well, I mentioned it earlier. First thing I did is get in touch with my sound. Everything you do is in sound, so I want to be in touch with it. I was married to a singer, and so that was something I noticed. A singer does not start with the coloratura passage work. They do exercises of intervals, of arpeggios, scales, broken thirds. So getting in touch with your sound and moving the sound. So I didn't have a routine about particular scales. I wanted to go through all the scales, and I did all the scale work, and I did unusual fingerings. And here's a little, maybe going off the subject, but I have another saying. An unusual passage has an unusual fingering. And you try to make a usual fingering for an unusual passage, you run into all kinds of trouble.
Okay. You look at Piatigorsky's fingerings. Okay. For instance, if one goes to watch the Walton Concerto, okay, you see some insane fingerings, right? Totally just incredible.
Yeah.
But it seems right. I think that's sort of kind of gets back to the message, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dr. King, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I hope this was a useful time for you. If you want to get in touch with me and ask more questions, I'm happy to do that. kingcello.com. And this has kind of inspired me to do a little bit more of this, because it's very frustrating to have so much to say and so little time to say it. So I may initiate some classes like this. Also, that Piatigorsky class, eventually it'll be on my website. So, in a few weeks you could check it out if you want to see. It's a 2-hour program of class, and it's good.
Well, thank you so much to Cello Bello and to Mr. Katz for inviting.
Yeah.
And we all hope that you have a lovely, lovely afternoon.
Okay, thanks everyone. Hope you enjoyed.